it's so prevalent how generals become untouchables, right? How could you dare say anything about this general? He served his... And that's what's happening here. And look, just because someone served their country and did a good job as a platoon commander, as a company commander, as a battalion commander, it doesn't mean they're going to be awesome as a general. In fact, there's some things might indicate that those aren't very different jobs. Especially when they did good as a company commander or a platoon commander during World War I, when doing a good job was not disobeying orders and doing what you were told to do and freaking scurrying to a position where you don't get killed. Right? Because what happened to the brave soldiers? Most of them got freaking killed.
We've talked about this. Thinking tactically and thinking strategically are really, really different, and it's actually really hard to evolve from a tactician to a strategist. And in the military, there's kind of a very clear delineation. Like, you're sort of a tactician as a junior officer, and the middle officers, you're sort of like an operational guy which sits between them, and then the generals are the strategic thinkers. But that evolution is really hard. It's really hard. You talked about Peter's principle, I think, on the last podcast.
Yeah.
Where you get promoted to your level of incompetence. That barrier between tactical thinking and strategic thinking is hard to overcome.
Yeah. Well, you run into it with companies as well, where you get some dynamic person in a startup and they're the CEO of the company, but there's only 48 employees and they can make things happen and they kind of impose their will and they can kind of win the market and talk to people and they're good salesmen and it works out awesome. And then all of a sudden they got, 500 employees and they've got a board and they've got regulatory environment that they don't know how to handle. And they turn into a disaster. Yeah. It doesn't always happen. But what we fail to do is we don't really do a good job of training people and at least making them aware of the situation that they're facing.
Yeah, and the other thing I wrote down was you're talking about this is, and I saw this as I got a little more senior in the officer ranks and kind of to get a little more observation of that general officer tier or that flag officer tier for the Navy is what gets them there is a bunch of success. A bunch of success. And with that success, if you're not careful, what that success can do, and it's not just true in the military, it's true everywhere, is that success it equals validation. And if you got to start to get to this validation like, hey, what I'm doing is working. You know what I should do? I should keep doing the same thing. And that flies against what you just talked about, which is the training and the evolution to think differently from what you did. And one of the simplest things we see this is, hey, if I'm a really good at a frontline task, good at that particular task, I'm going to get promoted and I'll be the foreman of this other team. And why I'm the foreman is because I'm really good at the task, but my job isn't to do that task anymore. My job is to think strategically and lead this team. And I have no skills and no training to do that because the criteria for getting promoted is being good at the task. And that success and that validation sometimes, not always, sometimes leads them to a level that they're not capable of doing, but the system doesn't allow you to give them any feedback. Because when you're a general officer, guess what? I'm a general officer.
There's something that you said that requires a little bit more exploring, and that is you said that when someone gets advanced to a general officer or a CEO, in many cases it's based on their successes. There's something else it's based on, their lack of failures. So Dave and I go on deployment. Dave does 4 operations. They all go okay. He gets the job done. Jocko goes, we're on the same deployment. You're a task unit commander. I'm a task unit commander. My task unit does 170 operations. 168 of them go really well and have a huge impact. 2 of them are jacked up. Who gets promoted? Who gets promoted? This is not like a theoretical question. Who gets promoted?
Yeah. I'm getting promoted.
Dave's getting promoted.
Because I didn't make any headlines for this screw up. I didn't cause all this equipment, and God forbid somebody got hurt or killed. We're not having a conversation with Dave.
Yeah.
Dave, no friction, no resistance, no problem for me, no additional paperwork. I don't have to send an investigation out for what happened. So
yeah, and it's not even that extreme. It's really not even that extreme. Like you're making it really obvious, but it's like, hey, Dave did 4 operations. They went well. Good job. Jocko did 100 operations. They had a vehicle rollover, right? They lost a radio, and they had a guy get wounded. The guy get wounded. It's like people understand that, but the vehicle rollover. What kind of was this really necessary? And all of a sudden, it's like, well, Dave kind of keeps his nose clean. He did a good job. Who's getting promoted? Dave is. So that's disturbing. The other thing is, you look at these generals. Who made it? Who's getting promoted? The ones that freaking lived. How did they live? They said, oh, sir, maybe I could go back to the rear and help you with your strategic planning. Here's another cup of tea. Oh, I really like Dave. I want to bring him back with me. Makes my ego feel good. So you're a little brown noser, and then you end up living through World War I, and now I put you under my wing, and along you go.
Yeah, and I'm sticking around the Army too after World War I.
Oh, yeah,
I can
that's right.
stomach that whole thing as opposed to all the guys that came back. I'm like, don't ever call me again.
Yeah.
I'm not. Don't ever call me again.
Yeah, and not to mention, I come back and I'm like, hey, look, I did my time. Cool, I'm gonna go out and be an entrepreneur and make money and build a business. You're like, hey, I'm kind of scared to get out. I think I'll just stay in here. I'll be getting a paycheck, 3 hots and a cot. I get the uniform. People treat me with respect. I'm good.